get done eating?
Yeah, well, not really, but I haven't. I only had like 2 minutes when I got in there.
Wouldn't
And
have
you
been
just finished
upset
my
if
broccoli
we
soup. It was actually pretty good.
would've.
That'd be
Oh, he was
awkward.
gonna ask if they did.
That would have been awkward just me just slurping up on my soup.
Trying to clean it as they go by and making sure you see your loud slurping sound.
Okay, let's do a little review before this quiz. So we're 2 sections. This was the first section. If I asked you to draw this standard position, the vertex has to be at the 0, 0. The initial side is positive axis. If your point is 3, negative 4, what quadrant is that?
4.
And remember, you draw your arrow going around. So if I ask you to draw that really rough sketch, is all I'm looking for. Do you know where your initial and terminal sides are if you have your vertex? Looking at this point, my x is, y is, how do we find r?
X squared plus y squared equals r squared.
So we get 9 plus 16, so 25 equals r squared.
5.
R is always positive. X and y can be negative, but r cannot. Okay, so then you should be able to give me the 6 trig functions. So sine, what's the definition of sine? Good. Make sure you're putting the theta with that. I don't want just the sin. So y over r would be negative 4/5. Which one is the reciprocal of sine?
Cosecant.
So that would be a negative 5 over 4. Cosine, x over r, so 3/5. So its reciprocal would be secant theta equals 5/3. Tangent, y over x, so negative 4/3. So that means cotangent is negative 3/4. Are we okay with those?
Yep.
So you have to know your definitions, but then those are pretty basic, just plugging your values in. What if, instead of giving you a point, we had some where I just gave you an equation for the line? What do we have to do here? Okay, I'm telling you this time that y is less than 0, so you have to pick a negative y value. Okay, it can be any negative y, and we usually try to pick ones that would avoid giving us fractions. If you think about it, when you solve for x, you'll have to end up dividing by 2, so let's pick an even y value. So how about negative 2? We know 2x plus 3 times negative 2 equals 0. And x is 3. Then we can find r. X squared plus y squared equals r squared. So
13.
r is the square root of 13. Does everybody know how I'm getting these values? Remember radicals, I want you to leave it in radical form, but if it's something like the square root of 8, go ahead and reduce it if you can. So then sine theta, y over r, negative 2 over radical 13. Can we leave it like that? No. So you multiply the radical 13 on top and bottom. Negative 2 radical 13 over 13. Reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So that would be r over y, so negative radical 13 over 2. Cosine, x over r, so 3 over radical 13. Which gives us 3 radical 13 over 13. Then we know the reciprocal cosine is secant. So r over x, radical 13 over 3. Tangent, y over x, negative 2/3. So cotangent, the reciprocal, x over y, negative 3 times. You guys know how I'm getting all of that? The next thing we did, we had that table that we filled out, and I told you I'm not necessarily going to ask you to fill out that table right now, but I expect you to be able to figure those out and answer questions. So, if I want cosecant of 90, remember we put points on this, we drew that picture to help us. At 90, what would this point be? X is 0, y is 1. What about at 0? X is 1, y is, what about at 180? And 270? Does everybody know how we get all those? And the nice thing about these, in every one of them, your R is, okay. So cosecant, that's a reciprocal of sine, so it would be R over y. So at 90 degrees, my R is 1, my y is 1. So cosecant of 90 is 1. Minus 4 times the tangent of 360. So tangent is y over x. 360 is the same as 0. So y over x would be 0 over 1, which is 0. Plus 2 times the cosine of 180. So cosine is x over r. At 180, your x is, and your r, so that's negative. So we have 1 minus 0 minus 2, I get negative 1. You guys okay with that? If I said like, sine squared 270 degrees, what does that mean?
Answer squared.
You take the sine of 270 and square. Sine is y over r, what's the sine of 270 then? Negative 1. So we become a 1. Is that alright? Next thing. So this is more like what we were doing yesterday with our work today. I might give you the value of one of the trig functions. We know cosine is what? X over r. Which of those would get the negative? The x or the r? The x, because r has to be positive. So that means my x would be the negative 5, my r would be the positive 8. Then we could find our y. Y squared equals 39. When you do the square root, you do plus and minus, and I have to decide which one to pick. So there's a couple ways to think about this. Sometimes I tell you the quadrant. I didn't here, but I gave you enough information to figure it out. Remember, all students take calculus. Cosine was a negative. In quadrant 1, everything's positive. So we know we're not in quadrant 1. And when else is cosine positive? Quadrant 4. So that means we had to be in either 2 or 3. In which of those is tangent positive? 3. In quadrant 2, sine is positive, so tangent's negative. So we know we're in quadrant 3. If you're in the third quadrant, would your y be positive or negative? Okay, I already gave you cosine, so really I just need the other 5. So sine y over r, do I need to go through that part, or do you guys know how you would do that? Yes?
It's y instead of theta. That doesn't change anything.
No, it's just a variable. Other questions? So I don't need to finish this one for anyone? What if I said find sine of z if cosecant of z is negative 4/3? We could certainly do it like the last one, or if you pay attention, sine and cosecant are reciprocals, so my answer is -3/4. So watch for those easy questions when they're reciprocals. If you didn't do it that way, then cosecant is r over y. What would your r have to be? +4, because r is always positive, and the y would be the -3. Okay, I think I have just one or two more. So this was like the last section of the homework. They're a little more challenging. They require a little more thought. So it would give you a statement like this. 90 is less than h is less than 270. If I want cosine of -h, I have to do something to turn this into a -h. What would that be? Okay. If you multiply by a negative, what happens to your inequalities? Okay, if you don't like it written that way, you could say it's between -270 and -90. That's optional if you want to flip it. If you don't like dealing with the negatives, what could you do to them? Could you add 360 and get the coterminal? So if you struggle with having the negatives, if I found my coterminal for both of these, that would be 90, and this would be 270. Is that more helpful? So it's between a 90 and 270. That means you could be in quadrant 2 or 3. Talking about cosine. All students. In quadrant 2, sine is positive, so cosine is negative. Take, in quadrant 3, tangent's positive, so cosine is negative. So my final answer? Negative. Is that alright? Last question, I just want to do one more involving the signs of these trig functions. I want to know what quadrant we'd be in if tangent's positive and secant is negative. So if tangent is positive, that means tangent is greater than 0. In quadrant 1, they're all positive, so that would work. In quadrant 2, sine is positive, so would that work? Quadrant 3, tangent is positive, so that's good. And quadrant 4, cosine's positive, so that one doesn't work. So I know right now, just from this, that I'm either in quadrant 1 or 3. Secant is negative. When I see secant, I'm thinking about cosine. It's reciprocal. In quadrant 1, they're all positive, so would secant be positive or negative? No. In quadrant 2, sine is positive, so cosine is negative. That would work. Quadrant 3, tangent is positive, so secant is negative. In quadrant 4, cosine is positive, so secant is positive. So which one works for both of them? Any other questions? I tried to hit all the big stuff we've gone over. Let's do our quiz then. Can I have a pencil and a calculator? Just hang on to the homework for a minute. Depending on how much time we have at the end, we'll either grade it or I'll just collect it.